The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the person or persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Madison Church of Christ.
Welcome to Stories of Amazing Grace, where we come to you from Vicksburg Chapel at the Madison Church of Christ in Madison, Tennessee. Thank you for joining us on YouTube and by way of shortwave radio through the facilities of World Christian Broadcasting, and for our live audience, our regular members here and some visitors, I think, tonight also. Thank you for being with us. Our theme scripture comes from Romans chapter 8, 38 through 39. I'm sure that nothing can separate us from God's love. Not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, not powers above or powers below. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord. Do you know what day it is? It's Wednesday. It's also Hump Day. It's also the 1-year anniversary of Stories of Amazing Grace. Oprah Winfrey usually gives the keys to a car when there's a celebration. I could not even afford the keys to pass out. But, as I trip over here, we do have after dinner mints. This is for your section over here. Pass those around. Where's Sheila? She did not pay for these either. Pass these around. You can take at least 3, maybe 5, depending on the crowd here, but at least 3. And while you're doing that, let me recap some of the guests we've had this past year. We started off with Dennis Boggs playing Abraham Lincoln. Jerry Sherrill shared some memories of the Madison Church here. Rudy Kalis from Channel 4 was here. Con Hamlet talked about educating youth and Bible prophecy and the importance of that. The Joy Boys, Donnie and Daryl Frierson, and also William Gooch. That was a musical night for us. Dick Brackett shared his love for children. He played Bozo the Clown years ago and also imitates Santa Claus. Not the real one, of course, but is a stand-in. Laverne Vivio shared her story of redemption. Don and Carol Bellis were here talking about God's providence in their life. General Paul Johnson, he started out as a pig farmer and ended up being a pilot in the Air Force flying warthogs. Marnie Ferree, she was very frank and honest in telling her story about sexual abuse and sex addiction. And Nathan Hale shared his struggles of finding God and purpose in his life. Coming attractions, you ask? Well, in April, have you been to the Hermitage House Smorgasbord before? I'm sure you have. Margaret Prosser will be here. She's an immigrant wife of a World War II mess sergeant and loves this country. And she will share her story in April. In May, Dr. William Alexander, in 2014, he was severely burned in a plane crash, and he will share how his faith in God has pulled him through a very long illness of a healing process. And in June, Jennifer O'Neill, the movie actress who has starred in 35 feature films, including The Summer of 42, some of you may remember that, cover girl model for 30 years, and the author of a book entitled From Fallen to Forgiven. She will share her walk of faith and how she is very much pro-life now after having an abortion years ago. And also she will tell us about a therapeutic horse ranch that serves military veterans, first responders, and their families, and that's not very far from this building. So that's coming up in June, Jennifer O'Neill. But tonight, one of our own, Dr. Ahn Meadows, is here to share her story of coming to America from Vietnam, and she will be assisted later by Michelle Stanton. She'll come up on the stage. But first, watch this video. It's a news clip concerning the last days in Vietnam, and also a trailer by the same name.
The panic has swept from the coastal city's crowded back streets and pagodas onto runways at the airport.
Our plane is surrounded here. I don't know how the hell we're going to get out. We're racing down the runway, leaving behind hundreds and thousands of people. Another dozen are there running along, grabbing at the air stair. We're pulling them on as fast as we can. There's a sea of humanity jamming on. Impossible to stop the crowd. We're pulling away. We're leaving them behind. We're pulling up with the people are falling off the air stairs. The plane is taking off.
We today have concluded an agreement to end the war and bring peace with honor in Vietnam. We have adopted a plan for the complete withdrawal of all U.S. combat ground forces. We are finally bringing American men home.
The American troops were gone, and as a result, the house of cards began to collapse.
We were dealing with an ambassador who was just convinced that somehow there wouldn't have to be an evacuation, and therefore there wouldn't have to be a concern about evacuating South Vietnamese.
These people were dead men walking. Sometimes there's an issue not of legal and illegal, but right or wrong. I borrowed a truck and I drove them to the airbase. And I had told them, when you hear 3 thumps, that means hold the baby's mouths, don't breathe, don't talk, don't make any noise. I was going to get them out.
The final battle of Saigon has begun.
That morning, there must have been at least 10,000 people ringing the embassy.
There was a sea of people wanting to get out. They looked up at the helicopters leaving, and I could see their eyes. Desperate eyes.
There are no words to describe what a ship looks like. It holds 200 and it's got 2,000 on it.
We have no more helicopters, that's it.
As it took off, I could see the group right where we had left them. It was just so serious and deep a betrayal. Who goes? And who gets left behind?
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ahn Meadows, come on up. Come on down. Glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Glad that you were not left behind.
I was the lucky one.
That was 1975?
Yes.
Do you have memories of that?
No, I was born in 72, so
Oh.
I'm sorry, I'm dating myself. But Vietnam fell in 1975 in April. And so we, part of this movie is about the evacuation, the absolute last days when Vietnam and the Americans realized that they had lost the war or the communists were going to take over. And so my uncle, who's part of this film, Kiem Do, he was the captain of the South Navy, the South Vietnamese Navy. He knew what was going on.
He was second in command, right?
He was second in command. So we were very blessed, but we didn't know what was going on. And at that time, the Americans said, well, they're just going to withdraw, and they wanted to save the Navy ships. It wasn't necessarily to evacuate the people or anything. It was so that the communists didn't get the military Navy ships and the equipment. So that was part of. So what my uncle at that time said, well, we're going to be in trouble. We're going to be, killed or tortured. So please let us come and take our families. And none of this was approved by the government. It was between the American soldiers and the Navy soldiers on the ground and in the seas and the Vietnamese soldiers, the South Vietnamese soldiers as well.
So it was all illegal, but it was the right thing to do.
Right. So again, they didn't get approval, and at that time, even the Americans didn't understand what that meant. I mean, I don't think anybody understood. It wasn't a planned process. It was, we're leaving, we got to get as many of our family members as far as the South Vietnamese Navy soldiers and their family, but what it ended up becoming was it was a word of mouth. We're going to leave. Who can come with us and who can be part of that family?
Let me show a couple of pictures that shows how desperate the situation was. This is not in the embassy compound, but another building, I understand, in Vietnam. And helicopter landed there, and people were just struggling to get out through an exodus to get on this helicopter. Of course, they all can't fit on this helicopter, but just a terrible situation. And this next shot here, helicopters were landing on U.S. Navy ships. This is a Vietnamese helicopter.
Right.
And they only had room for one helicopter to land on a lot of these ships. So after the helicopter landed with all the people on board, they pushed the helicopter over in the water and another would land,
right.
empty the people, and do it all over again,
right.
It's just amazing.
Right, and part of that reason is they didn't want the North Vietnamese, the communists, to get any of the equipment or to get any military planes or ships.
Wow. How big is your family?
So there's 7 kids and my parents. And I'm number 6 of the 7, and I'm the youngest girl. So there's 5 girls. So I'm the most timid and shy one of my family, and so we are a large, very close-knit family. And literally, we came on these ships as a family unit, and we were never separated as a family. And we were the lucky people, the lucky few, who got out alive, and who stayed as a family unit.
And your mother and father came with the ship?
Right. So my father was not part of the military. It was my uncle, and he
right.
Again, it was. So my uncle is my mom's sister's husband, and so we were all together, and he told us to come on the boat, and he would meet us later, and so we got on the ship, and it landed in the Philippines, and then we stayed in Wake Island for until August of that year, the same year.
We have a video, I believe, of Captain Kiem Do. That's how you pronounce it, right?
Kiem Do.
Kiem Do.
Yeah.
Kiem Do. Sorry.
It's okay. Well, it's funny because the first name is K-I-E-M. It's Kim, but people say Kim. And then his wife is T-H-O-M. So it's Tom, but that's not how you really pronounce it. But so it's Tom, which is the wife, and Kim is the husband. So it's almost like a.
What is your Vietnamese name?
Well, it's really it's Qunan. There's always a prefix in front of our names. You don't necessarily use it, but that's actually my real Vietnamese name. I only have one name.
Okay.
And my maiden name is Nguyen, Nguyen. So that's a very common Vietnamese name.
Okay. This video is about an interview that Rory Kennedy, the daughter of Bobby Kennedy, she's the one that produced or was the filmmaker on this movie, Last Days of Vietnam. We show a quick clip of this interview with your uncle. We roll that now.
It's a long story, but just a few words about the end of Vietnam. And at that time, the situation was desperate. There's no more fighting, if you want to say. Fighting for what now? Because the country, President Thieu had left the country, and the whole thing was in shambles. So from the Navy standpoint, we tried to do our duty to the last moment, but it's very, very desperate. But at that time, at the end, one of my friends, Mr. Richard Ahn Meadows, came and see me, and he told me that we need you to bring the big ship out. So I was very, very happy because that was the last chance, the last opportunity for the Vietnamese Navy to escape.
You know, Richard Armitage had approached Kiem Do and said, we've got to get all of these ships out so they don't fall into the hands of the North.
Right.
And so Kiem Do said, yes, we'll do that. And then he mentioned sort of offhandedly, you know, there's going to be a few soldiers on those ships and military men. And so Richard Armitage was dead silent when he heard that. And then they had this meeting place at Con Son Island. So they came to Con Son Island in the middle, you know, it was April 30th and everything was falling apart. And they went around the corner and saw these ships, and they were packed to the gill. And it's some of the most extraordinary footage because, you know, you see a ship that's supposed to have 200 people on it, it has 2,000 people on it. And it's all these people. And so then they debated, well, what do we do now? And Richard Armitage said, you know, let's take them to the Philippines. And just showed up there and, you know, saved 30,000 people. And, you know, everybody was a little shocked when they got there. But it's an extraordinary story.
Let me follow up with that. I'm going to play the next video here in just a minute. I found this video also. This is probably part of the movie. I don't know if it is or not. But it shows a quick clip of your uncle here singing the national anthem in Vietnam.
Này công dân ơi, đứng lên đáp lời sông núi, đồng lòng cùng đi hy sinh tiếc gì thân sông. Tôi đã hát không biết bao nhiêu lần hát quốc ca và cũng đã tham dự không biết bao nhiêu lần lễ hạ kỳ. 42 tuổi cũng là những con sói già ngoài biển rồi mà cũng không cầm nổi nước mắt. Thấy trùng lại và mới thấy thấm thía rằng lúc này đúng là mình đã mất nước, đã mất hết.
They lowered the Vietnamese flag, people crying. It was very emotional for them to lose their country, their flag, their ship. Everything is gone. And then we raised the American flag. We tried to do that with as much dignity as we could.
As I understand it, the Vietnamese did not have relations with the Philippines. And the Philippines would not let the ships in the country with the Vietnamese flag.
Right.
And so they lowered the flag, put up the American flag, and they're able to go to the Philippines and unload the people.
Right, and part of that was that I think the Philippines understood that the North Vietnamese were in charge and they didn't want to have conflict and get into a fighting war. So out of respect for the North Vietnamese and the communists at this time, knowing that they were in power, they wouldn't allow the ships to come in if the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese flag was up. So that was what you saw. They had to lower the Vietnamese flag and they would honor American flag because there was a relationship there. And so that boat, there were 12 ships, and like Rory Kennedy was saying, is that, you know, it holds about 200 people. For each ship had tens of thousands, about 5,000, so it was about 30,000 of the Vietnamese people, and really just soldiers and other people who got out. But we were literally the first refugees to leave, and then it closed down. There wasn't another exodus of refugees because the communists took over and they wouldn't allow anybody to leave.
Of course, so many people are still left in Vietnam.
Right. So now it was overtaken by the communists.
You got to be proud of your uncle.
Yeah, and the funny story is that because you know, growing up, we didn't hear a lot of stories. I mean, I didn't really know what he had done until probably in the last 5 years when, you know, I started to connect with him and I wanted to learn more. And I think when he wrote this book, he introduced it to me as an adult, and he said there's going to be a lot of things in here that you may not approve of, just because it had a lot of personal things about his journey. And so
it's a pretty graphic book. I didn't read all of it, but I read some of it. It's very informative, but he goes into detail concerning the situation as it was then.
Right.
But I'm sure you're proud of your uncle and proud of the book.
You know, he is a fantastic, honorable, respectful man. I mean, when I think of a man that is of integrity, he really, I honor him in that way. And, you know, my father wasn't able to be at my wedding, which was in Nashville, and he came and he spoke, and it was a privilege to have him there and represent me.
I think I have to answer this question because I grew up during the Vietnam era, and the war, of course, was not popular in America. Have you had any repercussions yourself, being Vietnamese, when people see you and they back away or they say something they shouldn't say? What has been?
Yeah, you know what? I'm sure they have. I mean, I'm the type of person who, if you say something to me, I almost ignorant about it. So I used to be in school and probably middle school, and I used to have this one big Samoan girl. She would say garlic, you know, selling garlic garlic, $1, garlic. She would always make fun of me. And I didn't know any of that because I didn't grow up in Vietnam remembering anything. And I was like, who are you talking about? I don't sell garlic. And she would tell me that I would eat dog. And so I was like, what? I never ate dog in my life. So, the funny thing is that all these whatever they...
Poodles are good, though.
Oh, poodles. I try not to eat any animals. Any dog animals. How about that? I do eat meat, so. But to answer your question, I'm sure there was. I think we were just kind of this happy-go-lucky. We didn't know any better. We were so tight-knit. So we came to, part of that leads into coming into California. My mom and father heard about California. Obviously, it's the best place to be in the world. So it's funny, you guys may not think that. But so we waited. My uncle he couldn't find us for the first 4 or 5 months. And then he finally found us in the Wake Islands. And so the first spot was New Orleans. So his family and my aunts went to New Orleans. And so we waited to go to California. And so we went to California as a family. And so, we were sponsored by a Methodist family, and their name was Stanton's. She was about 62 years old, and her husband was 75, and they sponsored 9 refugee kids, 9 refugees, a family. And so we totally brought down the property value because we were in Santa Monica, we were on top of shopping carts, and we thought that was a toy. So we really had these pictures where all of us were in shopping carts and we were laughing with our plaid stripes at the time because that was the 70s. And again, I think that we were so joyful to be a family unit. I don't think we knew better.
Were you a poor family, a rich family in Vietnam? What were you?
My father was an attorney in Vietnam, and so he worked. And my mother was a housewife. She actually got her college degree, which is unusual. So she speaks French, English, and Vietnamese, and so does my father. But we had nothing. We literally left with a shirt on our backs, and they did not speak English at all. Probably a few words, but not anything that you can get by with.
So you lived with your sponsoring family how long?
For about 4 or 5 months, and my mom went to night school every day, and she actually got a job. And so after that, we moved to a house, and the church gave us $1,000 a month for I think a year. That's amazing when you think about it. That's 75. And so here they are pouring their heart and money into our family so we can be on our own. But my mom is so resilient. She's one of these people who works hard, would do anything for her family. And so she found a way to, work and learn English and to, start a new life here. She just embraced it. I think that she of anybody embrace the fact that we're free, we're privileged, and we're blessed, and she was able to, start new like it was nothing. And maybe, and partly that was kind of a hardship for us because in that sense, she wanted us to acclimatize to the American culture, and so we don't speak Vietnamese, so there's 7 of us, and so the top 4 speak Vietnamese, and the bottom 3rd, and which I'm part of, we don't speak Vietnamese. I understand conversational, but she wanted us to learn and be part of this country and just thrive.
During our pre-interview, and I wrote down blocks of cheese for some reason.
Right.
So I don't know what that means though. So tell me about
So we were poor. And we finally moved to San Francisco after about the year, and my mom found out there were jobs up there. And so she applied for, so we didn't have money. We were still poor. We got $1,000. She probably made, I don't know how much she made. So we were on food stamps and welfare, and we got this block of cheese, roughly, it must have been 3 foot by, a foot long. And so if you know anything about Asians, we don't really eat a lot of dairy. So I remember all of us are trying a piece of cheese, and we're like, oh, we don't like it. So we said, can you give it back to the government? So the cheese was this big, this wide, and so we were so appreciative. And after we ate a piece, we wanted to give it back to anybody who could use it. They wouldn't take it back from us.
Don't have any now, do you?
No, I'm still lactose intolerant, so that won't be pretty.
Let's talk about your family and religious beliefs.
Yeah.
these are your parents?
That's my father. So his name is Nguyen Nguyen. I'm going to tell one joke because I think it's the funniest thing in the world. So if you know any Vietnamese people, their last name is probably going to be Nguyen, Nguyen, and there's a joke that says there's 8 Vietnamese names, and the first 7 are Nguyen because it's such a common name. Well, his name is Nguyen Nguyen, so and her name. So the Vietnamese people don't take the husband's last name, but her name is Thao Le, L-E, and so she, they didn't necessarily. So the primary religion was Buddhism. But they weren't really practicing like religious Buddhism. It was more like a secular rituals and praying, but not necessarily for the religious or spiritual part of that. So we had no faith. I mean, there was no faith. I didn't see my mom, besides doing more like Happy New Year stuff, but really about God, about any part of God in my life. Until my adulthood. I mean, there was nothing. Like, it didn't exist. So, you guys hear stories about these countries, these third world countries who don't ever hear about Jesus and God. Well, that happens in, the United States because it wasn't it wasn't a disbelief. It was literally exposure. So it's really whoever you are surrounded by. If that's not part of the culture, we didn't learn it. We didn't know it.
Let's bring Michelle Stanton up here. She had a great influence in your life.
Kind of.
Kind of.
Hi, Michelle.
Did you find God through her? Did she?
You know what? She
convert you, or what?
She did. She was there at my baptism. She didn't necessarily convert me, but she was the opening to really embrace God. Because I think as I was growing up, I started to look for God because we were so self-sufficient. I think when you hear about being in the world and it's about, what you can do, who you are, and it was really about, wow, we're self-sufficient people. We came here, we didn't have anything. Here we are. My siblings are very successful and they're very strong. So it wasn't like there wasn't anything above us. Not that we were conceited or it was just, we were self-reliant. And at that time, when you're self-reliant and you feel like you've achieved things in your life, you don't look for something more than that because you're not in despair. So part of that was somewhere along the line, I was thinking there has to be more than what we are doing in this life. And so I was looking in college, and so I took a...
Where'd you go to college? You went to several colleges.
Oh, I went to UC Davis, which is an undergrad in California. It's near Sacramento. And I remember I took a theology class. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to finally learn about God. And I remember, so it's very liberal. I mean, you guys probably know that California is pretty liberal. And it was about dreams. It was about, what does God say in your dreams? I'm like, what? Is this what God's about? Is what dreams? So I was really discouraged because my exposure to religion, my brother was a born-again Christian, and during some junior high years, he took me to this retreat, and I think part of my exposure was like a little bit of hypocrisy. Maybe I thought that the Christian people were supposed to be perfect, or they were supposed to be like the most righteous, and you want to be proud of them. And I think during that retreat, I just saw a lot of like gossiping and cliques, and so it felt kind of ugly, and I thought, this is not what God really means. Like, you talk about a person behind their backs, and then here you are preaching how much you love everybody. So I think that exposure was minimal. And plus, in California, all my friends were Catholics. So in high school, I would try to peek into their catechism class, and they're all doing all these Hail Marys. And I'm like, what are you guys Hail Marying? She goes, every time we do something wrong, we just Hail Mary. So they're just, again, I think the Catholicism, that exposure was very punishing. It's like you're going to hell. I mean, everything was very punitive. And so my exposure really was not necessarily negative, but I didn't see the love of God during those exposure to it.
And Michelle, when did you enter her life?
When she came to Nashville, she got a job at one of the hospice companies here as the medical director. And I was one of her nurses, and we didn't really care for each other.
That's true.
For about a year, and then some things happened, and here we are.
Yeah, I mean, we had a professional relationship, but as friendship-wise, we didn't have a lot in common. I mean, she's a Christian Southern woman, and I'm a California liberal woman. So, and
Was it tough to adapt to this culture then for you?
You know what?
If tough enough to come to America, then let alone come to
You know,
Nashville.
I've lived in many places. I lived in D.C. I lived in Texas for a little bit. So coming here was probably the hardest thing to do. And I think partly I'm pretty like what you see is what you get. So the funny thing is, so I got married. I came here for a marriage, but I remember going to the photographer and I said, "Can you help me cover up some of the acne?" And she said, "Oh, bless your heart. Okay." And I thought, "Oh, that's really sweet of you." And then, so later on when I was at work with Michelle, and I don't even know if you were there at the time, but so we were in our team meetings where we talk about patients, and then we were talking about a patient, and this one nurse said, "Bless her heart," and she said it kind of in a sarcastic, negative way. And I said, "Wait a minute, what did you mean by that?" And then so I think the culture, in the sense that I had to figure out what people really meant. And for me, I just kind of speak, at face value. So I think that was kind of the hardest thing, is that I love the people. They're just all heart and all soul. You just don't know what they really think about you or really want to say.
Well, bless your heart.
I'm leaving now. There he is.
Let's take a look at some other shots here of your family. You can do.
That's my mom. That's me. We all look alike. When you see pictures, we all kind of look alike. I didn't mean that all, but all my sisters look alike. Not all Asians. See, but we all look alike, right? I bet you guys can't find me. That's me right there. And
where?
Behind that little boy.
I see.
That's my daughter Sophia. She's right there in that little. But this is at my sister's wedding in Hawaii. So this is all my sister, and she's my sister-in-law. And that's just the Vietnamese New Year, and you wear the traditional ao dai, which is the dress. That's not my kid, I don't think. No, that's my sister's kid.
Okay.
Samantha.
And this next shot here.
So this is my ex-husband, and that's actually a good thing. We're ex-spouse. But part of the reason I met him in California in training, and he was the first person I ever wanted to be married to and have children, and so we trained together, and I moved back. He has a child from a first marriage here, so that's the reason why I'm here in Tennessee. But I think part of the reason I came to God was that God didn't want this marriage to happen. I think it wasn't based on truth, and so for a long time I kept on asking God. I said, just let us be married, let us have that, and God kept on saying, "Oh no, this is, there's a lot of red flags." He gave me so many warnings. My family knew it, my friends knew it, but I kept on praying to God to not get his approval. I was going to do what I wanted to do and try to get him to bless it. And at the end of the day, he said, "Okay, I'm going to give you what you want," but definitely it wasn't the right thing. So it didn't work out, and there was a lot of, I don't know, how do you say that? Yeah, there was just a lot. Let me phrase it this way. I think that I have such a hope about things, and this is the first time after being with him I lost hope in humanity. I know that's kind of a vague thing to say, and I can't say it's all because of him, but I saw a side of humanity that, I didn't know existed, at least in my own personal life. And so that brought me to my knees. I think, that was part of me suffering and listening to God in a different way, not telling God what I want, but really saying, what do you want? Because finally I said, "Well, God, what do you want to happen to this marriage?" as opposed to, "I want this." And he let me know, and I don't take that lightly, but what came out of this really awful, at least awful marriage, was that I am in love with God. And I'm in love with a daughter that I was able to have through this bad relationship. So, when you are in a different place in your life and things aren't looking good and you're not self-reliant anymore, and you see that you have nothing to offer because you can't change it, really that God presents himself, and he's always waiting to present himself. And finally I listened.
So something good did come out of that.
Yeah,
for
absolutely,
sure.
yeah.
Now, another sad moment is this next photo where your family's together.
Yeah, so this is...
This was a funeral?
My father passed away October of last year. And this is my family and my extent, and pretty much all my nephews and nieces. So really there's 14, out of our 7 children, there's 14 nephews and nieces. And so, you know, I'm proud again that let me say this, for all the people who've been in the military, and I'm proud and grateful and honored that you sacrifice your time with your family so I can be with my family. I mean, it's amazing to know that, I lived the American dream because of your family. I mean, so again, that's partly the honor that I have every day when I meet people who are part of the military, is that it's not just kind of a facade or the cliche thing to do, but I live it. I live the American dream from nothing.
What would your life have been like had you stayed in Vietnam, didn't get out?
We would.
Any idea?
You know.
We don't know, of course.
Yeah, what I know from my mom's family is that it's like a third world country. I mean, you know, you have your very wealthy politicians. Well, it's kind of like here, but so you sorry. So no, I mean, you know, it's a third world country. I mean, there's cities, and so I don't know. Maybe people love it because that's all you know when you know of nothing else. But we would have been suppressed in a communist country, and so depending on where you are in the ranks, being a lawyer, I guess, is good, but you're not going to be a privileged part in a communist country.
Do you know what getting off subject somewhat, do you know what the average wage is over there compared to in America?
You know, I can't say I know that, but I know that my mom's family, they were destitute. I mean,
yeah.
you get given, I mean, you're given whatever job. It's not like you are, it depends on your connections. I mean, unless you're involved in, you know, some political or military connection, then you don't get anything.
Right.
So you live in a third world. So I mean, it's not like a jungle. Like, we're not living in the jungles, but, you know, just like anything else.
Sure. And a bright spot of your life, though, is this picture we saw earlier on the beach.
So Sophia's 5.5 now, and she's...
This is Sophia?
Sophia.
5.5. Beautiful girl. And now you are a doctor, palliative, how do you pronounce that?
Palliative medicine.
Care doctor. And what is the difference between that and one who works in hospice, or do you work in hospice?
I do both. So one more thing, the reason why Michelle is here. So remember my family, the Stantons who sponsored us? Well, when I was going through my divorce, I was living in an apartment in downtown Nashville, and I got kicked out because they were selling the condos, because look at the boom. I mean, they wanted to make a lot of money. So at Christmas time, it was November 25th, and Thanksgiving, they said, well, you have to move out by Christmas. And so Michelle and William Stanton, look at that, that's a God thing, offered their house. I mean, financially I didn't need it, but emotionally, spiritually, everything else. I mean, my family is in California, and so her and her family, again, invited me and supported me with Sophia, and I lived with her for a whole year. And so part of that growth, and that's why you saw us together at Madison, is that because she helped me grow to be a Christian. Nyla was part of that. I mean, I saw Nyla and Russ was coming on board, and it was just like, wow, this is what really Christians do. I mean, they talk and they love and they pray. So I think that was so powerful, where, again, my friends who, you know, I didn't know about Church of Christ, and so I would tell them, hey, I go to Madison Church of Christ. And so these are local, you know, Southern Nashvillians. They're like, oh, you're Church of Christ? I said, yeah. I mean, I wasn't Church of Christ, but I was going to a Church of Christ. And they're like, well, do you know? I was like, I'm not sure. What should I know? So again, I think I don't know what the perception And so I always talk to Michelle about what is this perception about the Church of Christ. I mean, I guess it's ultra-conservative, versus, I don't know, Baptist, whatever else. But so they would warn me, like, Church of Christ. I said, okay, I love it. So anyway, I'm sorry, I sidetracked. So palliative medicine and hospice, I know everybody gets worried about the H word, and please don't. Palliative medicine, really all that means is that you are focusing on the symptom of any disease. So I think the problem with medicine is that we're so driven to treat the disease, and when you go in the hospital, I mean, we're trained that way. We're trained to think about you have heart disease, COPD, cancer, whatever it is, and we focus on the disease, but what we end up not forgetting, but what becomes secondary and tertiary is the care of the patient themselves. Are they having symptoms? Are they short of breath? And what we end up finding is that we don't treat the whole person, because if they're still in distress, if they're still in pain, it doesn't matter if they're disease or you're getting their blood pressure back, but if they're still in severe shortness of breath, then their quality of life and their continued treatment plan becomes worse. And so palliative medicine really, it doesn't matter when you're diagnosed, but it's technically if you're diagnosed with an illness. So if you got diagnosed with cancer, God forbid, and we come in and say, well, how do you stay in your cancer treatments? How do we prevent the nausea? How do we prevent the pain? How do we prevent shortness of breath and diarrhea and your hair loss so you can continue your treatments? Now, hospice is just a spectrum of that. It's just towards the last 6 months of your life that you get symptomatic care, because unfortunately, if you have some friends and family members, people don't die in peace. I mean, there's a lot of symptoms and pain, and whether it be emotional and physical, it is sad and it's torturous and scary. So it really is a spectrum. Palliative medicine is just on diagnosis, but you could be living for 10 years. Hospice becomes that after 6 months of your life expectancy. That's all a made up, by the way, that's a made up prognosis.
The 6 months?
Yeah, do you guys want to hear about that? I get off tangents, but part of the reason, because people always hear, well, I only have 6 months to live. Well, Medicare, in 1980, Medicare had to figure out how to pay for benefits, because everybody's going to the hospital towards the last 6 months of their last 6 months. They're in and out of the hospital. So what Medicare and the government did said, well, how much can we pay for a benefit that would keep people out of the hospital but giving them care? And they calculated it to be 6 months. That would be kind of the cost, the cost-benefit ratio. So it really is a made-up prognosis. And I guess what I want to say about that is that don't get so chimed into that. I mean, the idea about care is that how do you get more care regardless of what your prognosis is? It could be 6 months, it could be 8 months, it could be less. But if we focus on the time, we forget how to live in the present. And so...
Is it a depressing job?
No. So, no. And I'll tell you why. It is so, it keeps you humble. And I'll let Michelle talk about her experience as a hospice nurse, because she literally goes out into people's homes. It's such a wonderful field. I mean, you do a lot of medicine, for sure. So it's not a lot of hocus pocus. People think it's kind of touchy-feely, which it is, but there's a lot of medicine involved. But part of that is that what comes to where God comes into play every single day is that when you are ill, who do you pray to? Even if you're not God-believing or a believer, you don't depend on yourself anymore. You know that you are vulnerable. So that door opens every day for me to experience God, to talk about God. And again, when you're a physician, there's some neutrality. You're not supposed to impose your Christian belief or any belief. But when someone is hurting or has a disease, there are so many openings every single day to talk about and be present with God.
What have you heard from some of the patients on their last days? Has some turned to God?
Yeah.
Who
I'll let Michelle talk, because she's a talker, so I'll let her.
I know from my own experience, my sister wasn't in hospice, but she died 18 years ago tomorrow.
That's right.
But I tell you, people aren't necessarily believers in the 11th hour conversion.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Jesus allowed that man on the cross to be converted with dying breath. I'm a believer. But I see where a lot of people, including my sister, when their mortality is looking at them in the face, that, to me, that's God's way of saying, kind of like Ann was talking earlier about, you give me what I want, Lord, please let this be. And sometimes he'll do that, but in that moment, he just gets in your face. And sometimes I think, at least with my sister, God got in her face. She was about to embark on college. She was trying to get her life together, and bam, 9 months later, she dies. So I do believe that it's not that, oh, you're afraid of going to hell, you're going to become a believer. I really think God uses those moments to touch lives, and I believe he uses those moments to say, I am here. Look at me. Don't look at your disease. Don't look at the way you've been going. See my face. And I have seen too many people change in those last few moments of their lives, whether it be weeks, months, even hours. And I will tell you that I think Ann would agree that when you are with someone who is nearing that transition period to the next phase of their existence, to me, those are some of the most sacred moments. A member here asked me one day, or we were talking, and I said, yeah, I do cry a lot. He goes, you cry a lot? And I said, I want to tell you something. The day I stop crying, that's the day that I become a Walmart greeter. I would look great in blue with a smiley face. So, but it's true. It's true. And people say it takes a special person. It takes a special person to do anything, to be an ICU nurse, to be able to arrange flowers. It's just God. It really is a calling. Yeah. And I'm so glad. I'll tell you what, this lady right here, I would put her, I've been with many physicians, and there are many smart and capable physicians. Oh. I would put her up against any physician in the hospice community, at least in this region, if not this state. She is fantastic. Even though we don't work at the same company anymore.
Alive, guarded. Sorry.
She's my teacher, and I go to her all the time, and she is so fantastic.
Well, thank you. But part of your question too is like, remember Nyla? Well, obviously you guys remember Nyla, but she has hundreds of close friends. So even I was able to sneak in and be part of her life towards the end, and so. Even in that's God's. I mean, how would I even get close to Nyla? I mean, she has all of everyone protecting her, and they are on guard. And so, again, the access to people, because I think the scariest thing for most people in their transition or their declining state is that they don't want to die alone. And so how do you comfort someone, and you can't say, well, I'm going to be there. And what you can say is that you're not going to be alone because God is there. And so, and I think that they'll always ask you, that's the number one fear. There's studies about that. They'll say, we don't want to be alone. And they'll always ask you, do you think I'm going to be okay? And I do say, you're going to be okay because God is right here by your side. And so even that access point is so powerful because their families start to change. I mean, people who don't believe in God or are atheists, and there's a lot of atheists out there. So you start to question who you are and that you're not about yourself anymore. So again, God has led me to a field, and both of us, where we are blessed with certain gifts that otherwise, I started out in OBGYN.
Does everybody come to God at that point? At some point, do they recognize, or some deny him even to the point of death?
I think that they don't necessarily come to God, but no, I don't know that everybody comes to God. I think that there's still some worry about what their existence will be after. And so if I can reassure them that there is a God, maybe they can come to a different way. But there's plenty of people the people who don't come to God, I'll be honest, are the people who die with terminal agitation. And so terminal agitation is real. It's when you are in and out of this when you're declining and you're in and out of this consciousness. So, it's like being disoriented. If someone wakes you up from a deep sleep and you're disoriented, well, imagine you going into this conscious world and unconscious world. So the people who do not believe in God have terminal agitation, meaning they are delirious, agitated, to climb out of bed, and it's real and it's ugly. So what I do know is that when you don't believe in God or you don't have a higher being besides yourself, then your symptoms are escalating to a different level, almost untreatable with medicine level, because it is. It's an existential pain that's exacerbated by your physical pain, and no medicine will help resolve that. So that's the terror we've seen. I mean, it's true horror to see that. So I think that's for the godless people. I mean, that's not a judgment. It's just that's what we see when you don't have that in your life. So that's been kind of our journey. I mean, I started out as an OBGYN, and who thought I was going to be living in Nashville and be part of Church of Christ? I hang out with white people all the time.
We're glad you came to America.
Thank you.
Glad that you're here, part of the church. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Oh, I
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Let's have a prayer before we leave. Don't leave yet.
Oh, I was scared. I thought you were shoving me off.
You got to get your cup. You got to pray, then we get the cup.
Okay.
All right. Father, thank you for this evening. Thank you for these two women who have dedicated their lives to you and helped so many people in their last days of life. They say they're not special people, but they are special people. It takes a special breed to touch people's lives who are suffering so much. And some of them have so little to hope for in their dying days, and others are very satisfied and looking forward to seeing you. We're thankful that that ship came to this country and people helped Dr. Meadows to find a place in Nashville and be such a help to so many people. Give us a good week this week, Father. Help us to always be a good witness for you. We pray through your Son.